Namaste, good morning. Today I'd like to touch upon some emails that I received that show two aspects. One is an error with the understanding. You see, the ego can be very naughty and can even utilize the teaching for its sustenance, for its benefit. So we need to look at how the ego operates for its intrinsic survival. And the other aspect is on the subject of desire, which I'd like to speak about, as it's an important topic, and the relationship of desires with the ego. After this brief exploration, I will take any questions or any sharing that you wish to share here. Most welcome for that. So the first is a message which I saw which said, condemning is also happening and not anyone's doing. Therefore, you lost the point. This is addressing me. How can you condemn if you don't do? Doing and condemning are just happening, and this is enlightenment. This is precisely correct. When the understanding is there that whoever is condemning you, it is an action happening through that person, and that person is not the doer, that is enlightenment, because you are no longer holding that person accountable for his action or her action. But this does not give the person condemning a license to condemn. You see, this is where the error is. The understanding that condemning is happening through someone, whether it is A, B, C, or D, is happening because it was meant to happen, and it is not that person's doing. This is enlightenment. But as far as the other person is concerned, the one who is condemning, there is an error. Because you will condemn someone if you accuse them of doing something or being something. The one who condemns does not have the understanding, and therefore he or she condemns. With the understanding, one cannot condemn another. This is not a license for condemning people. And you say to yourself, oh, condemning is happening, I am not doing it. Condemning will not arise with the understanding. If you find that you are still condemning people, then it means that the understanding has not taken deep roots. More importantly, the one who is condemning is not at peace. The one who is condemning is judging. You see, this teaching is like a fire that burns away all the antics of the ego. And there's nothing left to hold on to. I received an email from someone who said that they are averse to 90% of the people in their lives. Don't get along with them. Which means you are 90% averse to yourself. Everything is a reflection within one's own consciousness. What percentage of people are you averse to in your life? 5%, 2%, 50%. Whatever that percentage is, you are averse to that percentage of yourself. So do take a closer look at the people you are averse to. Sit with the aversion. Look at it. Explore it. Because that feeling of aversion arises within your own self. It is not outside of yourself. What you are exploring is within. This second email, written very clearly, with someone who has obviously explored this teaching in depth. I'm reading out because it shows a clear understanding and yet a potential trap that the ego can set up for itself. I have been preparing for a competitive exam for some time now. However, I feel I have not put in efforts to the best of my abilities. Studying seems a burden and a chore, how much ever hard I try. This situation seems to have had an effect on my emotional well being too. In your talks, you keep emphasizing that the results are not in our hands and that it is God's will. I would like to ask whether the efforts we put in or the lack of it are also God's will. The fact that I am not able to give my best, no matter how much I try, should I accept it as also the will of the divine? You see, this reveals that there's a doubt whether I have put in my best effort. That is a different thing than putting in one's best effort. This is an important distinction because in one place the questioner says, I feel I have not put in my best efforts. If you feel you have not put in your best efforts, you will perhaps be right in expecting that the results will not be the best results. And guilt arises because I feel I have not put in my best efforts. So you may accept that not putting in your best efforts was God's will, of course. But so also are the results. What this teaching says is what the Bhagavad Gita says. In any situation, if it is your exams, do all that you can do. Study as hard as you can. The results are not in your control. As simple as that. That is what the Gita says. Very simple. Here, there is a knowing that I have not put in my best effort. That has to be accepted. And so also, the result, because one has not put in one's best efforts. You see, once again, this understanding does not become a license to not put in one's best effort. It is true that for some reason or the other, you are unable to put in your best effort. Fair enough. There could be reasons. There could be environmental reasons, there could be emotional reasons, there could be other reasons. So the awareness is there that I have not given this my 100%. That when it is accepted, one is being honest. I am being honest with myself when I say that in a given situation, I have not put in my best efforts. And therefore, the consequences may not be the best. That is honesty. And when you explore, what were the reasons why I didn't put in my best effort? You may perhaps come up with a reason. Perhaps not. But the acceptance is there. You see? The acceptance is there. I have not given this my best. Therefore, I cannot expect the best results. In any case, even if I put in my best efforts, the results are not in my hands. So, being earnest, being sincere and honest, that yes, I have not put in my best effort. But if you first say you have put in your best, and then you say, no matter how much I try, I have not put in my best, then the ego is going around in circles. Because it feels guilty. Because it knows I have not put in my best. With this teaching, when it is lived, when you are in the working mind, in the moment, putting in one's best effort happens automatically. If it does not happen, then the understanding kicks in, it was not meant to happen. And the matter ends there. There is no further involvement in the situation. There is no judgment. So there is a very thin line here, which I mentioned, that the ego can dig a pit for itself, which is not putting one's effort and saying, it is not my destiny to put in my best effort. So it's fine. That is what can happen in some cases. To use the teaching as a prop to justify one's actions. Ramana Maharshi would say, even on his path of self-inquiry, he would tell the devotees, the effort is all yours. And the last point I would like to touch upon is an email that I received on the burning desire for self-realization and enlightenment. The burning desire, is it good or bad? And it is consuming me that I am not getting enlightened. Will I get enlightened? Won't I get enlightened? It is consuming me. Many people feel this. Those who are drawn to spirituality, those who are drawn to the inner journey. You see, it is easy to say all desires are desires, even the desire for enlightenment is as good or bad as other desires. But the desire for enlightenment is a noble desire. The person has seen in their life that this transient life, this fleeting life, does not give me happiness. So the desire for mundane things, for material things in life is dropping away. And there's a desire for that which is beyond this circus of life, beyond this show. So it says a lot when someone has this burning desire for self-realization or enlightenment. That is when the Guru manifests to help the aspirant on this journey. And that desire may or may not be conscious. Yet the grace is such that help is provided along the way. So it is not to be looked down upon that, oh, even desire for this is a desire after all. No, it says a lot about the person's journey, where they are coming from, what is their focus in life. But now, the ego tries its best to fulfill this desire as well. The ego takes possession of this desire and tries to bring about an outcome, which is a natural functioning of the ego, the way the ego is designed, so to speak. The problem is that thinking itself to be the doer, the ego tries to fast track the enlightenment. If I do things, the chances that I will get enlightened faster are brighter. If I read more books, if I do mantra chanting and japa all day, if I look at more videos, if I do this, if I do that, if I do that, it is possible that the result of enlightenment will happen faster for me. This is what happens. The ego steps in through the back door on this desire, takes control of it, possession of it, as my desire for enlightenment, links it to doership to try and get an outcome. As I read a beautiful sentence, the ego tries to force its way into the kingdom of heaven. That leads to frustration. If you see your own life, what happened? What are the circumstances in your life that put you on the spiritual journey? Perhaps some setbacks, perhaps you were born this way. Whatever it be, if you are honest, you will realize none of this was in your control. Whatever you saw in life, the suffering that you saw, your nature maybe since you were a child, was any of that in your control? So when you saw that this material world is not fulfilling me, even that was not in your control. The quest for enlightenment is not in your control. It is a happening based on factors beyond your control. So when one trusts that whatever this force has put me here, brought me onto this road, onto this path, if I trust that, whatever insights it has given me, whatever light it has shown for me on the road ahead, if I simply rest in that trust that there's something far larger than me and my doership, I don't need to fast track my enlightenment because that power knows best. And then it becomes a beautiful journey of unfoldment because you have not put pressure on yourself. Because the desire for enlightenment is the desire for a true and permanent happiness that does not depend on circumstance. So if there's frustration that I am not getting enlightened, that has to be looked at. Who is this one who is getting frustrated? Who is this one who feels it has to get enlightened fast? It is the ego. Even this is witnessed. Even this is witnessed. The ego is trying to fast track its own absence. The ego is trying to fast track its own absence, and in doing so, it is perpetuating itself. Nisargadatta Maharaj had said, with no desires you are dead, but with low desires you are a ghost. At least the desire for enlightenment is not a low desire. What did he mean by that? What did he mean that with low desires you are a ghost? What is a ghost? The subtle body. All the unresolved, unfulfilled desires, the vasanas, sanskaras. When the body drops, that bundle is still there. I want to fulfill my desires, which I could not fulfill while being in the body. So the one who desires enlightenment, because that one has seen that all these other desires, even if they get fulfilled, I am not fulfilled myself. That one is on the journey of self-discovery. All right. We can take any questions now, or if anyone wants to share anything. There are a couple of points. One is that next Sunday, hopefully, my mother will join me and share her experience, which is a very different perspective from what I speak about. If you would like to know more about her, you can visit her website, santoshsachdeva.com. Hers is the path of Shakti, and her personal experience and understanding is what she will share briefly, and also a few questions which had come in for her. She will answer those. So if it interests you, it will be a kind of a joint satsang, and it would be a nice exploration to look at another dimension of understanding. The other is that towards the end of January, I will be on a very short trip to Tiruvannamalai. If any of you are there and watching this or watch this later, then you are welcome to get in touch with the team for an informal meeting with us with the relevant norms of social distancing and so on. That's the second point I wanted to mention. And now we can see if anyone wants to ask anything. Yes, Kumar.
Namaste, Gautam sir.
Namaste.
So I had a question. Like, is there really an end point in on the spiritual path, or there is endless flowering even after self-realization? Because this idea of enlightenment as an end goal could be a tool for the ego to play. Because there was a quote I read from the Heart Sutras.
Sorry, Kumar, can you speak a bit louder because I'm not able to hear you clearly?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better.
Yeah, so I was asking, is there really an end point on the spiritual path, or it is an endless flowering even after self-realization? Because I read a quote by Buddha on the Heart Sutras, Gate Gate Paragate, Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha, that there is going on and always going beyond, always becoming a Buddha. So if we take this perspective that ego to take it as an end goals, or is it not an end goal? So could you please shed light on that?
You see, that is a very nice question you have asked. The point is that for the ego, it is the end goal. What happens with enlightenment is that the sense of separation of the ego dissolves. So there's no one left to even consider an end goal. You see, it is for the ego based on its conditioning that it sets up this goal. There's no goal as such because enlightenment is not a destination to be reached. But what happens is that with the collapse of separation, with the collapse of the individual, that questioner has collapsed. So the joke is that even if the end goal is realized, there's nobody left to understand that the end goal has been realized. You see, this is not a kind of trick statement because when the dissolution takes place. It is the dissolution of the ego as a separate entity. The realization is always there as such. The vastness, the cosmic consciousness, whatever word you give it, it is not a point in space to be reached. So it is the first step and the last step, because it is the last step for the ego with its sense of doership in that sense, at the point of dissolution. And it is the first step into a new way of being. The whole point is that there is nobody left anymore to ask about this or worry about it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was very helpful. And I really look forward to your session with your mother. I really look up to her. And what's so beautiful about you that you're so admiring and respectful of the Shakti traditions, because I was reading in Vivek Chudamani by Adi Shankara. They say that a male birth is important, and usually I've seen a hint of male chauvinism in many traditions, and even in Advaita they are dismissive of Shakti aspect. But the way you are respectful to all traditions, it really, instills spirit of acceptance of every tradition and teaches us so much.
Yes, and I'm so happy that I read that Ramana Maharshi, when he was asked this question, that whether it makes a difference to be a man or a woman as far as enlightenment is concerned. And he said, absolutely no difference. What has the gender of the body got to do with it? You see, and you are right. There's this old conditioning that a male birth, etc., is required. But I mean, look at sages like Anand Mahima, Mirabai, Lal Ded of Kashmir. I think this is really a big misconception which is floating around, and it has been for eons. But I mean, it's just absurd, you see, to even consider that this is a remote possibility that a male birth is preferred in any way. That's my view. I think a lot of orthodox people may have different views, but I'm saying this point because it's closer to home for me than others, I guess, because I have a mother who reached her the culmination of her journey. So you could say I'm biased in a way, maybe. I don't know, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
I think you're so right, but it really hurts when great people like Adi Shankara write in their writings about male birth. But I think the conditioning remains even after realization for great beings. Who knows?
You see, they say things in a certain context. We misunderstand the context. And these things were said at specific points in time. You see, because there's also the nature of the female mental emotional body, the male mental emotional body, the way they are made up. So it's not that these statements are said in a wrong way or without any meaning, but they are said in a certain context, you see. So the stillness, for example, of the male principle and Shakti by its nature, by nature these are different, but you can't say the Shiv aspect is better than the Shakti aspect because they are ultimately both one. So we don't know the context in which these statements were made, so we cannot judge them. But they are aspects, they are right in that sense also, that perhaps why they are saying this, because we look at those times, we look at the roles played by men and women, we look at the principle of the design of the male and female body and so on and so forth. But what happens is all that gets lost, all that gets forgotten, and then the statement appears that this one said that only this is possible, that one said only that is possible, and then we get hooked on to all that. That is what happens, unfortunately. Yes?
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, Holger.
Yes, hello, Gautam.
Hello.
Sorry, it's very dark on my side. I just quickly raised my hand and I cannot explain it, but there's just gratitude for your presence and the silence in which you share the message. And it's just such a deep resonance. I just wanted to say hello and thank you. And more is not on my mind.
Thank you, Holger. It's so dark where you are that it's as if your face is emerging from the absolute. Thank you. You're always very kind with your words. Thank you, Holger.
Thank you. Maybe this is just an escape from my ego. I don't know. I mean, but we will see. Time, we will see.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Yes. Yes, Pavan. Are you there? Pavan, are you there? Okay, let's move on. Ah. I think Pavan has merged into the absolute. Now we have Radhika. I think I saw your hand up. So
should I ask?
yes, Radhika.
Namaste, Gautam ji.
Namaste.
I'm glad that this is the second time I'm attending your session. My question today is, after enlightenment or after self-realization, does one act according to the nature they have been like conditioned with already with their body, or does their behavior change? Because I've heard in your videos that you said that it was your nature not to react or not to take actions against someone who does wrong to you every time. So my question is whether one's behavior or taking action changes after enlightenment. I mean, does everyone become soft or accepting of the people around as just part of consciousness or consciousness itself, and not say or do anything even if the other person is doing wrong to them, like maybe in indulging into, or I would not say indulging, but making that person suffer. So if, for example, I'm self-realized and still I'm getting like made to get involved in a fraud, or someone is touching my body in a very wrong way, like being a girl. So there's some pervert. Am I not supposed to take action, or if I'm self-realized, I'll act according to the nature which I had been having since long time?
Yes.
Like, am I clear with the question?
Absolutely clear. Absolutely. And you see what happens as a result of the understanding. It could be either way. Your nature could change because new conditioning has been infused into your system, right? So supposing you were one who really didn't care about people and you didn't like people generally. Let's just say that was a situation. And with this understanding that, we are all so connected because it is the same electricity that flows through all of us. Everyone's coming from the way they were treated as children, which we don't know what kind of things happened in their life. So this teaching may bring about a compassion which was not there earlier. This understanding that you're starting to look at the people in your life a bit differently may change this approach you have to people and may make you, in that sense, more open to accepting the other person for who they are. Now, someone who is already like that, whose nature is already like that change may not happen to that degree because their nature is already like that. Okay. Now, you have given these examples of someone touching you, let's say, in a way that you find not appropriate or whatever. What happens? This does not mean, this understanding does not mean that, oh, since he is not the doer, I sit back and do nothing. You have to do precisely that which you think and feel you should do. Now, in one case, let's say someone might just say that, oh, please be careful, don't repeat this. That could happen. Someone else may just ignore it because that's their nature and not say anything for a while. Someone else may be very vociferous and say, don't do that. Again, each person is designed a certain way. But what is more important is, whatever happens, you have the full understanding that this person has done something they were supposed to have done and meant to have done. How I deal with it is how I am supposed to deal with it. But you are now dealing with a situation. The objective scene has happened, that this event has transpired through this person. So what happens is you are no longer targeting an individual. The objective viewing of the situation has happened. There's a bit of a distance created, so to speak. And then you deal with the situation the way you feel best. What tends to happen is we kind of pile up all our hate and condemnation, etc., and overlay it on an individual who we hold accountable for his actions. The difference is you will still do that. After the understanding, the person, if you feel, needs to be made accountable, that will still happen. That person has to be made accountable for their actions. But deep down, you know that whatever you do, whatever you try, A, may not guarantee the result because we don't know what the person will do next, for example, right? B, you know that this personal finger pointing, this hate of you did this to me, I hate you, that dialogue does not arise. You still, if you feel you have to report the person to a higher authority or to the family member, that still happens because you do what you feel is right. But you are no longer carrying this load within yourself of, accusations and blame and condemnation and hate as far as individuals are concerned. So life starts being lived in a more objective sense. That is what happens. So change may or may not happen. It doesn't mean everyone becomes complacent, everyone becomes like, nobody is the doer, so let them do anything. No, that is again a misconception. Now, for example, my teacher, he was not a patient man. He liked to get things done fast. So even if I was editing a book with him, every 3-4 days, he would call me early in the morning and say, what's happening? What's happening? What's the status? He was impatient by nature, right? So that nature did not change. But I just had to tell him, oh, I'm working on chapter 3. No, all right, all right. And then he was happy and fine, you see. So the thing is that whether an aspect of nature changes or not is God's will, you see. But to say that, oh, I'm impatient, I should not be impatient, why did God make me impatient, and so on and so forth, that does not arise for the sage. That does not arise for the sage because the sage has not judged his impatience. He has accepted it. Does that help answer your question?
Just to, elaborate, like, isn't that nature also related to ego to some extent?
Everything is related to the ego.
And how come the nature still remains the same after realization as well? That is my question.
Because that is the nature of the ego. In some cases, it will remain.
But ego does dissolve, isn't it?
The ego does not dissolve. The sense of doership in the ego dissolves.
Oh.
The ego is there with you till you die.
Okay.
The you cannot live without the ego. Then who will live one's life? The ego cannot dissolve. It is the sense of doership in the ego that dissolves.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Let's try and get Pavan back.
Hello, Gautam sir. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Pavan, you disappeared like the wind.
Yeah, I had to go get my headset.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the teaching, sir. Firstly, and this is my first time I'm joining, and I'm very thankful for that. I had a quick question. Ramesh ji used to mention in some of his videos that I've seen that after death, I go back to the source, and pretty much he was saying that the identified consciousness merges back into the impersonal consciousness. Um, my question is, if let's say someone has perhaps not yet been able to come across Advaita, or has not had the understanding of nobody being the doer, do they also have to not worry about any karmic baggages, and that just believe that they go back to the source, or this only applies to people who have been gifted with losing the sense of doership?
Pavan, that's actually a very beautiful question you have asked, and it's been on my mind to give a separate talk on this point. And the fact that you've asked it is, I think, for me, good, because then I'm going to go ahead with that. This has to be looked at. I'm going to speak very briefly on this, and I think we will have a separate Zoom specifically only on this topic. You see, the point is definitions differ. The fact is, at the end of one's life, with the body dropping, the sense of the ego, which is identification with the name and form as a separate entity, that also dies with the body. But the subtle body, the vasanas and the sanskaras, the ball of unfulfilled desires and tendencies, that is still there. Even the Buddhists say this, okay? This ball is what takes a rebirth. This ball, to fulfill its unfulfilled desires and tendencies, takes rebirth. So the point is, the same ego as such does not take rebirth because the ego dies with the body, but the process of consciousness of reaching its journey's destination of going home must continue, and therefore that ball manifests into another birth till that takes it further to dissolve the karmic load, so to speak, right? Now we can look at it in another way. In this sense, the ego is finished with the death of the
Yes.
body. Now, someone else can say that their definition of the ego is the unresolved desires and tendencies. That doesn't mean they are wrong. You see, these are just words and labels after all. So that person may say that this ball of vasanas and sanskaras, which is left after this body drops away, that too has to be resolved. And I call that the ego. Let's say, okay, in that case, that ball will continue into another birth to resolve those issues. Because you see, the whole journey of life is healing back to the source. So all these issues in the subtle body have to be resolved. That is the movement of consciousness when it gets to know itself. So in that case, you could say that it is the ego which takes rebirth. You see, therefore, I don't like this hardline approach which people say, oh, in Advaita, it means it's all fine and everyone's free at the moment of death. It may be. But if you are looking at consciousness as a whole and you are trying to understand the larger picture, what is this about? How does consciousness manifest through various bodies? What happens at the death of the body? And you explore this. Everyone's journey is my journey. You see, because if there's an unresolved ball of vasanas and sanskaras, that is going to take rebirth to manifest and resolve those issues. So in that sense, everyone's journey is my journey.
Yes.
So very briefly, I've touched upon this very beautiful question you have asked, because it is so true what you have said, and there's a lot of misconception on this.
Yeah.
You see, and that is
Thank you,
why
Gautam.
I feel that this desire for enlightenment is a most noble desire, because it is a desire which benefits all, not just the individual who thinks it is benefiting only the individual.
Yeah.
That is the whole thing. Yeah. Thank you, Pawan. Thank you for coming
Thank you
on.
so. Thank you so much.
Which part of where are you from?
I'm currently in Atlanta, and
Atlanta.
yeah, and I had the privilege of speaking with you, I think a year ago or so, and ever since then, I've just been watching your videos, and I've just been lazy about going to your Facebook page and joining one of these sessions, and I apologize for that.
Oh,
And
not at all.
thank you for all the
My
teachings.
pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yes, Vandana.
So Gautam, this various questions which have arisen during this session. So I just had a thought. I may be wrong, that enlightenment is not an endpoint. It is a personal development which happens all throughout your life. It's not like a switch on, switch off mechanism which happens in the body. So what do
Yes.
you say to that?
Yes, this is. You see, the fact is that, in one sense, when we all die, we are enlightened, because that death is the death of the ego. So no one really need be worried whether they'll be enlightened in this life or not, because everyone's journey is the journey which leads to the absence of the ego.
Yeah.
You see, but by what you are saying, Vandana, that would mean that there's no end to this. Because if in each birth the journey is till the end of the birth, what you are saying is it is a continuous process, right?
Yeah.
Till the end of one's life.
Yeah, because even when you
That
die, you have unfulfilled desires. So you're not really,
yes.
that enlightened as you think you.
No. Why do we have sages like Sai Baba, Ramana Maharshi, and so on?
But they are so few, and I mean, you
They are
can just
there.
count them on your fingertips, huh?
They are there. But why? What makes them who they are? Because they have died already while living. You see? Because they are dead already in that sense. They are dead to what is false. They are dead to the temporary. They are dead to the transient. And that is why they are omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. They are beyond the clutches of time and space. They are shining examples. So you could say, in that sense, for the average Joe, like you and me, it's not a switch as such, which goes on and off. But you'll be surprised, because there's such a shift in the quality of life when awakening happens. There's such a lightness. There's such a deep peace that you may find that if Vandana is in a situation which is troubling her, something happens, an event happens, suddenly you feel you've tapped into that peace, and you'll be astonished that, my God, in spite of this turbulence, a part of me is at complete peace with that. That is when you know the switch has been turned on, Vandana. It is a most beautiful discovery. When in life's journey, something happens which is untoward, which is not pleasant, and you realize deep down that you have accepted that, and there's a sense of peace, then you know the switch has been pressed on. That is when you know. You see, and if you find that you are no longer swayed by the pleasures and pains that life has to offer you, you are no longer swayed as you were before, let's say, then it means the switch has been switched on. When you find that you are no longer doing the dance of duality like you used to earlier, between the left and the right, the switch has been switched on, Vandana.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so rather than think conceptually of this end goal of enlightenment and what will happen, is it the start, is it the stop? Let's forget all that. How much at peace is Vandana today as compared with 1 year earlier, 5 years earlier, 40 years earlier? How much more at peace with what happens in life, with Vandana being Vandana? Is she more at peace today than ever before? If the answer is yes, it's quite true. I could say that more than ever before, as far as I know, I'm at peace. Then the switch is switched on.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Animesh, I think this can be the last question.
Gautam, am I audible?
Yes.
Namaste. So last time you gave me insight into what is working mind and thinking mind. This time my question is about this present moment. When I am very aware for this present moment, then there is one thing which comes, like it is a kind of insight that the next moment I am imagining it, and the previous moment I am remembering it. So like the idea of time seems to fall apart. So is it I am fooling myself, or it is really true? So that,
The minute you say the present moment is the present moment, it is the past, isn't it? The minute one calls the present moment, it becomes the past moment. This is not a trick. What I'm trying to say is that the minute thought occurs about the past and the future, the present moment is gone. So this question which you are asking is a question which is being asked in the process of time. Now, for example, Animesh, right here, right now, let's assume not one thought arises. Where is the question of time? Thought means time. In deep sleep, are you worried about the past moment and the future moment and the present moment? That person disappears in deep sleep. So it is all conceptual. Thought creates this differentiation between past, present, and future. Absence of that thought is the presence of presence, not the presence of animation. Absence of that thought is the presence of presence, not animation's present, not animation being present as a separate entity. If all your memory was taken away right now, your entire memory bank was deleted, what would be left is the pure presence of presence. Animesh would not even know he is called Animesh. In that pure presence, there is no question of time, past, present, and future. The baby, pure being, I am, is pure presence. That is why Maharaj would say that the state in which the baby is you could say the absolute state. Because this awareness has not kicked in. There's pure being. You see? So in this conceptual framework of time that we have built for ourselves, what we realize is that when our thinking mind is operating, we are going into imaginary futures, which is taking us away from the so-called present moment, or we are going into the dead past and all that happened and all that story of this happened to me, that happened to me, which is completely dead, but it is the thinking mind which is going into this dead past. But when one notices that the mind is not moving either way to the imaginary future or the dead past, what happens is the mind is still. That stillness we call the present moment. There is no such thing as the present moment. The stillness itself is the present moment in that sense. The absence of the thinking mind is the presence of presence. That presence is always there. It is not that when the thinking mind is operating, the presence has vacated the stage. But the presence has got covered by this layer of the activity of thinking conceptually. And when that activity stops, you could say in that sense, the presence shines through. It is uncovered. So the sage is not always in the present moment. The sage is presence. The sage is presence itself. Okay. Okay. So we can end now, and I will just look at you all for a couple of minutes.